Welcome to my channel.
And this is English Podcast Station.
All right, let's dive into some business English today.
Sounds good.
We're looking at, a specific episode from the English Podcast Station.
Yep.
It's episode 2.
Right.
And it's all about a sales meeting conversation.
Oh, okay, cool.
You know, one of the things that you had, highlighted in your notes was this idea of driving sales, which is such a key concept in the business world.
Yeah, it is.
And, it seems simple on the surface.
Right.
But there are so many different approaches a company can take.
Yeah, for sure.
To actually drive sales.
Definitely.
And we see that even in this episode.
Okay.
They're talking about things like, matching competitors or coming up with promotions and things like that.
Yeah, those are all really common strategies.
Yeah, and it's interesting how even like a simple phrase, like in the market, can actually be quite loaded.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when we say something is in the market, we're not just talking about a physical marketplace.
Right.
We're talking about, all the competitors,
the whole
the customers, the trends.
Yeah, you got it.
So it really encompasses kind of the whole ecosystem.
For sure. And that kind of awareness is so important when you're trying to understand business conversations, articles, all of that.
And speaking of the episode that we're looking at today.
Okay.
It seems like the manager in this scenario is maybe not the best communicator.
Well, let's just say there's room for improvement.
Yeah, there's definitely some room for improvement.
Yep.
One of the things that you pointed out in your notes was that phrase that he uses, "It'll never fly."
Oh, yeah.
And on the surface, it seems like a pretty innocuous phrase.
Oh, we'd think so.
But the way that he uses it is so dismissive.
Absolutely.
It's like, he's not even considering
shutting it down.
The idea. Well, so before we even get into, kind of dissecting all of that, I think it'd be helpful to actually hear that exchange.
Okay, sounds good.
So remember, this is from the English Podcast Station.
Okay.
Their episode on sales meetings.
Got it.
And, just pay attention to the language that's being used, the tone of voice, and really how these characters interact with each other.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay, here we go.
All
right, people, we're holding this meeting today because we've got to do something about our sales, and we need to do it now. I want concrete solutions. How do you plan to drive sales, Roger?
Well, in fact, we're the most expensive in the market, so maybe we need to lower our prices to match the competitors.
Lower our prices.
Right.
Not very creative. It'll never fly with Swan. What kind of thinking is that? Jeez. Anyone have a better plan?
Natalie, perhaps a promotion, maybe a 2-for-1 offer or something like that.
What? That's the same thing? Bad idea. Really bad idea. Damn it, people, come on, think. The CEO will be here any minute.
Wow.
I know, right?
You can really feel the tension in that room.
Oh, yeah. It's palpable.
Yeah, just that little snippet gives you a sense of the atmosphere.
Totally. And, the way that he just dismisses Roger's idea.
It's pretty harsh.
Yeah, it is.
And I think what's interesting is he uses that phrase, "it'll never fly," to shut down Roger's idea about the prices. But later on, the CEO suggests something very similar with the 2-for-1 promotion.
Exactly.
And then suddenly he's all for it.
You're right. It's like the idea itself wasn't the problem.
Right. It seems like it was more about who was suggesting it.
Totally.
Yeah, and maybe wanting to look good in front of the CEO.
Yeah.
Especially since he's about to walk in the room.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really great example of how sometimes it's not just about the words themselves.
Right.
It's about all of these unspoken things.
Yeah, the context, the power dynamics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think about, how we communicate in a workplace setting.
Yeah, and it's something that language learners might not always pick up on right away.
Right. They're so focused on the grammar and the vocabulary.
Absolutely.
Which is important, of course.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's so much more to it than that.
It's like the subtle cues, the unspoken rules.
Yeah.
All of that plays a role.
So I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some things that, somebody could do if they're in that situation?
Right.
Like, let's say you're Roger or Natalie.
Okay.
You have this idea that you think is good, but the manager is just like, nope, it'll never fly.
It's tough.
What do you do?
Well, I think first it's important to acknowledge that. It can be really demoralizing.
Oh, absolutely.
To have your ideas constantly dismissed.
Yeah.
Especially without any constructive feedback.
And it makes you question your own judgment.
Yeah, you start to second guess yourself.
Yeah. And you don't want to speak up anymore.
Right, exactly. So one thing you could try is to reframe the conversation a little bit.
Okay.
Instead of just accepting that dismissal,
Yeah.
you could politely ask for some more specific feedback.
Okay.
You could say something like,
Yeah.
I understand your concerns, but I'm curious. What specifically about this idea doesn't work for you?
That's a good point, because it shows that you're not just, taking it personally.
Right.
You're actually trying to understand.
You're trying to learn and collaborate.
Their perspective.
Exactly.
Now, I'm guessing that probably works best.
Yeah.
If you have a manager who is,
right,
somewhat open to feedback themselves.
Yeah.
But what if you're dealing with someone who is just completely closed off?
Yeah. That's tough.
Like, what do you do then?
Honestly, sometimes the best thing you can do is pick your battles.
Okay.
If you know that challenging them every time is just going to lead to more conflict and frustration, it might be better to focus your energy on presenting your ideas in a way that's less likely to trigger that negative reaction.
So how do you actually do that?
Well, one technique is to try to frame your suggestion as a question or a potential solution to a problem that they've already identified.
So in this case, Roger could have said something like, hey, given that our sales are down, I'm wondering if adjusting our pricing strategy could be one potential solution.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's good, because it brings them into the conversation.
Yeah.
Rather than feeling like you're challenging their authority.
Exactly.
And it shows that you're thinking strategically.
Right.
You're aligned with their goal.
I like that approach.
Right.
Because it feels more collaborative.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel as confrontational.
For sure.
Now, another thing that I was thinking about is, maybe you could try to anticipate those objections ahead of time.
It's a good strategy.
So, like, for example, if you know that your manager is really focused on cost cutting, you could present your idea along with, a cost benefit analysis.
Exactly.
Or a plan for how to offset those potential expenses.
That's really smart.
So in this case, Roger could have said, I know that we're all trying to reduce expenses right now.
Right.
But I've run some numbers.
Okay.
And I actually think that by lowering our prices, we could increase our sales volume.
Yeah.
And that could more than offset,
right,
that initial price reduction.
That's good, because it shows that you've really thought it through.
Yeah.
You're not just throwing out ideas.
And you're taking their concerns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It shows that you're on the same page.
So these are all really, really great strategies.
I think so too.
And it's such a good reminder that, communication is about so much more.
Absolutely.
Than just the words.
Yeah. It's about reading the room.
Yeah.
Understanding your audience.
And building that rapport.
Building trust.
For sure. So I think we've covered a lot of ground already.
Definitely.
In this first part of our deep dive.
For sure.
We've, looked at the idea of driving sales.
Yeah.
The whole concept of in the market.
Right. Yeah.
And we've really dissected this sales meeting.
This interesting example.
So before we move on to part 2.
Okay.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
What really stood out to you?
Well, I think for me,
the
way that the manager dismissed the ideas was really striking. And it made me think about how important it is to create a more positive and supportive environment.
What about you?
Yeah.
Did anything resonate with you?
It's funny, because I've definitely been in situations where I felt like my ideas weren't being heard.
Right.
And it's so frustrating.
It is.
And it makes you not want to contribute.
Yeah.
So I think these strategies are really valuable for navigating those kinds of situations.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to dive deeper into all of this.
Sounds good.
In part 2.
Okay.
So stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We're still talking about that sales meeting.
Yeah, from the English podcast station.
Exactly. And in the last part, we were talking about, some strategies for dealing with difficult managers.
Right, like how to reframe your suggestions or anticipate those objections.
Yeah, exactly. And those strategies are so useful, especially in a sales environment.
Oh, absolutely, because persuasion and negotiation are key in sales.
For sure. And speaking of sales, there's another phrase from the episode that I thought we could unpack.
Okay, which one?
It's match the competitors.
Oh, right. That was Roger's suggestion.
Yeah, he was talking about lowering prices to match the competitors.
Yeah. And it seems pretty straightforward, but I'm guessing there's more to it than that.
There definitely is.
Okay, so what else is involved? Well, on the surface, it seems like a simple way to stay competitive.
Right. Just lower your prices and you're good to go.
Yeah, but it can be a lot more complex than that.
Okay, so what else should we be thinking about?
Well, matching the competitors can actually involve a whole range of strategies.
Like what?
Well, it could be anything from, product development to marketing campaigns, even customer service initiatives.
So it's not just about price.
No, it's really about looking at the competition and finding ways to position yourself favorably in the market.
And I guess that means thinking about your overall value proposition.
Exactly. It's not just about being the cheapest.
Right. It's about offering something unique.
Yeah, something that sets you apart.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
Because matching the competitors isn't just about copying them.
Oh, I see what you mean.
It's about understanding their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And finding opportunities to differentiate yourself.
And ultimately creating a unique selling proposition.
That resonates with your target customers.
Exactly. And this brings us back to communication.
Oh, how so?
Well, because if everyone's just focused on matching the competitors, it can actually stifle creativity.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And it can lead to a race to the bottom.
In terms of price and value.
Exactly.
So instead, teams need to be encouraged to think outside the box.
For sure.
To challenge those assumptions.
And come up with fresh ideas.
Right, ideas that will set them apart.
Absolutely. And this is where good leadership comes in.
Okay, how so?
Well, a good leader is going to create an environment where people feel comfortable sharing their ideas.
Even if those ideas are a little bit unconventional.
Exactly, even if they challenge the status quo.
It's about fostering that culture of innovation.
And collaboration.
Rather than fear and conformity.
Exactly.
And this actually reminds me of another important point from the episode.
Okay, what's that?
The concept of promotion.
Oh, right.
Oh?
Natalie suggested that 2-for-1 offer.
Yeah, and that's a classic example of a promotion.
For sure.
But it's important to remember that promotion can be a lot broader than that.
Right. It's not just about discounts.
Exactly. It can include everything from public relations to advertising.
Yeah, and social media marketing, even content creation.
It's really about getting the word out there.
Yeah, creating awareness, generating interest.
And ultimately persuading customers to choose your product or service.
Exactly. And just like with matching the competitors, effective promotion requires a deep understanding of your target market.
Right. You have to know who you're trying to reach.
And you have to understand your competitive landscape.
And what makes your product or service unique.
Exactly. You have to have a clear selling proposition.
I remember in the episode, the manager initially dismissed Natalie's suggestion of a promotion.
Oh, yeah, he did.
But then when the CEO mentioned a similar idea,
he was all for it.
It was like a complete 180.
And that just highlights how important timing and audience can be.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Sometimes it's not just about what you say.
It's about when and to whom you say it.
Exactly.
So in this case, maybe the manager would have been more receptive to Natalie's idea.
Yeah.
If it had been presented in a different context.
Right, like maybe during a brainstorming session.
Yeah, or if he hadn't felt the pressure of impressing the CEO.
Exactly.
So the takeaway here is that effective communication is about more than just language skills.
Right, it's about being aware of the situation.
Understanding the dynamics.
And adapting your approach accordingly.
And that takes practice.
It does, but it's a skill that anyone can develop.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in this part.
We have.
We've talked about matching the competitors.
Yeah.
The concept of promotion.
And the importance of timing and audience.
Now in the next part.
Okay.
We're going to delve into the English podcast station's Fluency Builder tips.
Those are great.
Yeah. And we'll discuss how to sound more natural and confident when speaking English in a business setting.
That's something everyone can benefit from.
So stay tuned. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive, and we're going to shift gears a little bit.
Sounds good.
And focus on fluency.
Okay.
Now, the English podcast station has this really cool segment called Fluency Builder.
I like that segment.
Yeah, and they have some really practical tips.
Yeah.
For sounding more natural and confident.
Especially in a business setting.
Especially in a business setting.
Yeah.
And I love how they emphasize that fluency isn't just about speed.
Right. It's not about talking as fast as you can.
It's about clarity.
Exactly.
It's about getting your message across.
In a way that people can understand.
In a way that's engaging.
Yeah.
So one of the tips that they highlight is using the phrase, be here any minute.
Okay.
Instead of saying like, I'll arrive soon.
Right, or I'll be there shortly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's such a small change.
It is.
But it makes you sound so much more natural.
More like a native speaker.
More like a native speaker.
Yeah.
And it's more casual.
It is.
It's more conversational.
Yeah.
Which I think is really important in a business setting.
Yeah, you want to build rapport.
Yeah.
You want to create a more relaxed atmosphere.
Exactly.
And it shows that you're comfortable with the nuances of the language.
Right, and that can boost your credibility.
Absolutely.
So another tip that they share is using the word consider.
Okay.
Instead of think about.
Right.
Again, it's a subtle shift.
Yeah.
But consider has a more, I don't know, deliberate and professional.
Yeah, it sounds more thoughtful.
Yeah.
More decisive.
So instead of saying, we should think about a new marketing campaign.
Right.
You could say, we should consider a new marketing campaign.
Exactly. And it sounds more action-oriented.
Yeah.
Which is important in business.
And then their final tip is to use the word brilliant.
I like that.
Instead of great.
Yeah.
And I know brilliant can sound a little...
Yeah. It's a bit British. But I think it could also add a little bit of enthusiasm and genuineness. I agree.
To your praise.
Yeah, it sounds more sincere.
So instead of saying, that's a great idea, you could say, that's a brilliant idea.
I love it.
And you know, these small tweaks can really make a difference.
They can.
In how you come across.
It's like adding polish to your communication style.
Exactly. And that polish can go a long way.
Especially in a professional setting. Yeah.
So as we wrap up this top dive, I think it's important to circle back to one of the core themes that emerged from this episode.
Right.
And that's the impact of different management styles.
That was a big one.
Yeah, we saw how the manager's approach really stifled creativity.
Created a tense atmosphere.
And how a more supportive and collaborative style can really foster innovation.
And empower team members.
Exactly.
To share their ideas.
And it's not about being a good manager or a bad manager.
Right.
It's about understanding the impact that your communication style has on others.
And making conscious choices.
Exactly.
To create a better work environment.
So as you continue learning business English, we encourage you to think about what kind of communicator you want to be.
That's a good question.
Do you want to be the kind of leader who inspires and motivates?
The kind who shuts people down.
And remember, communication is a skill.
It is.
That you can develop over time.
It takes practice.
It takes practice and it takes effort.
And it's worth it.
It's so worth it. Because when you can communicate effectively, you can build stronger relationships.
You can navigate difficult situations.
And ultimately achieve greater success.
In all areas of your life.
Yeah. So that's it for this deep dive.
That was a good one.
We hope you found it helpful.
I hope so too.
And we'll see you next time.
See you later.